Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on this week's video. On this week's video, we're in session number 7 regarding our recent series that we've been following entitled DWC Discipline. And I can't believe we're in session number 7. I remember in session 4 I told you that that would be our last session. And then more information became available, which required session 5, and more information became available, which required session 6. And today we're in session number 7 because, again, new information has become available that sheds interesting light on the new situation that QMEs are facing and the challenges that we're up against with the Division of Workers' Compensation's new interpretation of CCR 9795 and the complexity factors. And if I was to ask you, what do you think is the bottom line result of these new changes being promulgated by the Division of Workers' Compensation, what would you speculate as to the DWC's motive, the DWC's end product, the DWC's vision, their overall vision, in promulgating these new changes in the interpretation of the complexity factors? What would you say that to be? What would you speculate that to be? Well, I'm here to tell you that after doing some math and running some scenarios regarding the Division of Workers' Compensation's new rules, the overall and overarching purpose can only be one thing. It can only be one thing. And that is to drive down the costs of QME reports and drive down the profitability, if any, in doing evaluations of injured workers. Basically, with the DWC's new interpretation of the complexity factors, any money that there was to be made in this business has basically disappeared. And I'll give you some actual examples. I have my laptop here. I have an Excel spreadsheet open on the laptop, and I'm going to give you an actual example of an actual case and how the actual case will now bill out according to the DWC's new interpretation compared to how the case would bill out according to the age-old interpretation of the complexity factors as we've known them to be all the way up until this point in time, as we try to swing at the curveballs that the DWC is now throwing us. So the new information that I'm referring to, and which compels today's discussion, has to do with the DWC's new release. In fact, it came out yesterday, of their online QME continuing education module. It's a 1-hour module. They now have 2 modules. They have a 1-hour module on the medical treatment, on the medical treatment utilization schedule, and they have a 1-hour module now on QME use of the complexity factors. So the DWC has published 2 hours of continuing education courses, and the 2nd hour just came out yesterday. Well, I don't know if you've had a chance to review that 1-hour course, but I have, and I took notes during the 1-hour course. And I must say that there weren't a whole lot of surprises that I wasn't expecting within that 1-hour module, but there were a few. There were a few that caught even me off guard. And as you know, if you've been following this series, I've been following these changes with the Division of Workers' Compensation quite closely, and I've been in contact with several authorities, including non-authority doctors who have been disciplined by the DWC, and I've had the opportunity to review some of the reports that are in question, and so I've been following it quite closely. So even I was surprised to be surprised by some of the new things that I learned by reviewing the DWC's online education module yesterday. So let's talk about that module, and let's talk about what it is that the Division of Workers' Compensation is promulgating with their new interpretation of the complexity factors. The first thing that strikes me is that as of this date, today, or I should say as of yesterday when the video was released, the Division of Workers' Compensation is sticking by and sticking to their position. At this late date, the DWC has already promulgated their position, but the DWC has run into some opposition. There is a lawsuit pending, and there is an upcoming hearing scheduled for just a couple weeks from today, where the DWC is going to be called into court and called to answer on their new interpretation of the complexity factors. So the DWC has been challenged at least once, and there is a pending lawsuit, but as of yesterday, the DWC has not changed their position. They have not wavered one bit. In addition to the lawsuit that's pending, and the hearing's coming up in about 2 weeks, I plan on attending that hearing. But in addition to that, the DWC has received some challenge from a spokesperson who has come forward, an authoritative spokesperson has come forward to challenge the DWC's new interpretation. And this authoritative spokesperson is credible, and I've discussed this with you on prior videos. This spokesperson is credible because this particular spokesperson was involved in drafting the language of CCR 9795, the complexity factors. In other words, the author of the complexity factors has come forward to challenge the DWC's new interpretation of the complexity factors. The language of the complexity factors is unchanged, but the DWC has come up with a new interpretation of the old language that was authored by this credible spokesperson. And this credible spokesperson has come forward to say that was never what we intended when we drafted CCR 9795 and the complexity factors. And basically this spokesperson is calling the Division of Workers' Compensation nuts. And still, as of yesterday, the Division of Workers' Compensation remains unwavered. They remain undeterred. They remain steadfast in their new interpretation of the complexity factors. So either the DWC is going to be compelled to reverse its new interpretation, or this new interpretation could be what it's going to be and how it is that we're going to be forced to live with billing our QME reports from here forward. If that's the case, we all are going to have to make some important decisions, because as I said, the bottom line end result of the DWC's actions is to dramatically reduce the amount of dollars that QMEs can bill for their otherwise complex reports. And I have an example, an actual example to share with you today. So that's the first thing, is that the DWC remains undeterred, apparently not scared at all, not in any way concerned about the upcoming lawsuit. But a couple other things that were revealed yesterday in the DWC's online education module that I just want to share with you today as regards to the complexity factors. Now, we've talked in the past about causation as a complexity factor. I don't think we have to go over too much about causation as a complexity factor, except to say that it's the DWC's new position that you can only use causation as a complexity factor in the case of a denied claim. If you have an accepted claim, if the claim has been accepted, then it's the Division of Workers' Compensation's position that causation is no longer an issue. Well, I don't know who they consider it to be not an issue for, because many times we receive written requests from the parties to address causation along multiple points of the life of the claim. So I don't know who the Division of Workers' Compensation is speaking for, except for speaking for themselves. But the QME doctor can, of course, address causation upon written request of the party or parties requesting the report at any point during the life of the claim, but the QME cannot use causation as a complexity factor, even if the QME has discussed difficult issues related to causation, unless the case is a denied claim. So here, the Division of Workers' Compensation has given us as QMEs a little bit more homework, a little bit more work to do in terms of discovering for ourselves whether or not the claim has been accepted or denied. So through phone calls and letter writings, the Division of Workers' Compensation has been so kind as to give us yet another step, another box to check in preparation for our upcoming QME evaluation, and that is to determine if indeed the claim has been denied or if the claim has been accepted, and how that impacts our use of causation as a complexity factor. Now, my opinion, this has to go away. This has to disappear, because doesn't the claims administrator have the authority? Doesn't the defense attorney have the authority? Doesn't the applicant attorney have the authority? Don't the parties have the authority to request an elaboration on causation from the qualified medical evaluator? If the claims administrator is willing to pay for causation as a complexity factor and ask the doctor to elaborate or to update or to provide a new opinion or a current opinion on causation, don't they have the authority to do that? The Division of Workers' Compensation apparently feels that no, they don't. They don't have the authority to request a discussion of causation, except in cases where the claim has been denied. So it seems to me that this has to disappear. There's certainly no mention of an accepted claim versus a denied claim in the language of the complexity factor. It simply says, addressing the issue of medical causation upon written request of the party or parties requesting the report. Well, similar to the causation complexity factor, we've spent some time discussing the apportionment complexity factor, and it's my opinion and my experience, and it was my recommendations to you, that you will rarely use apportionment as a complexity factor. Now, you will often discuss apportionment in your report because it's required under Labor Codes 4663 and 4664 that if you find permanent impairment in your examinee, you must then provide an apportionment determination. It's required. But that does not qualify apportionment as a complexity factor. Apportionment as a complexity factor has a much higher threshold for its applicability. It requires determination of the impairment by evaluating the claimant's employment by 3 or more employers, 3 or more injuries to the same body system or body region, or 2 or more injuries involving 2 or more body systems. So this is a very tall threshold. So you will be using apportionment as a complexity factor very rarely, if at all, if ever. I mean, that's how often do you see examinees who have permanent impairment caused by up to as many as 3 different employers? That's a very rare case. So with these hurdles related to causation and apportionment, the opportunity to use these complexity factors has gone basically down to the use of causation only in those cases that involve a denied claim. Now, imagine this. Imagine this. Imagine you get a call for an evaluation, and lo and behold, it involves a denied claim. And I've spoken in the past many times on many videos about denied claims, about the compensability exam under Labor Code 4060, and about the AOE-COE determination in denied claims. Well, lo and behold, your phone rings, and it turns out to be a denied claim. And everything comes together for the evaluation, and you qualify as an ML 104 for the evaluation. Can you imagine this? So what that means is that you have a total of 6 hours between any combination of the 3 complexity factors, which is face-to-face time, review of records time, and medical research time. So that qualifies as 3 complexity factors. And then, through a miracle, you realize that the case is a denied case. The parties are addressing a discussion of causation, and lo and behold, the report actually qualifies as an ML 104. And you start to get happy. Well, don't get so happy so soon, because according to the Division of Workers' Compensation's new interpretation of the ML 104, your ML 104 will be billed out only based upon the amount of time involved face-to-face, let's call it 3 hours, the amount of time involved with the review of records, let's call it 3 hours, there's 6 hours, the amount of time involved with medical research, let's call it an hour. 3, 3, and 1 is 7. You can expect to be paid at $250 per hour for this evaluation for 7 hours. That is 7 times 250 is $1,750 for this ML 104. Now, if this sounds a little low, the reason it's a little bit low is because you are now no longer allowed to bill for your report preparation time. You're only allowed to bill for your time involved with face-to-face, review of records, and medical research. It doesn't tell us that in the code, but this is the DWC's new unpublished interpretation, for which they are disseminating a video, an online education video. It came out just yesterday, as their education process to educate us doctors as to the new use of the complexity factors. Under the DWC's new interpretation of the complexity factors, you can only expect to be paid for your report preparation time, the hours and hours and hours that you spend at your computer bringing this case into a coherent final product that can then be mailed out to the parties and represent your report. You can only expect to be paid for your report preparation time when you have an advance agreement from the parties that the evaluation involves extraordinary circumstances. Now, since the DWC's interpretation, a new interpretation has come out, and more emphasis has been placed on obtaining prior agreement from the parties of extraordinary circumstances, I and other doctors who I frequently consult with have attempted to obtain this prior agreement from the parties. And do you want to know our success rate in obtaining prior agreement from the parties? So far, our success rate has been 0. In other words, it's either never going to happen or it's going to happen so rarely. How are you going to get the claims administrator to agree to provide you in writing, in advance of the evaluation, that the evaluation involves extraordinary circumstances? One recent conversation that one of my my doctors who I consult with had with the claims examiner. The claims examiner said, our policy is that we don't commit to any payment at all, and we don't commit to any payment level at all. So I'm not signing it, and I'm not committing to it. And it's my expectation that that's going to be your experience as well. If you're able to get advance agreement from the parties that the evaluation involves extraordinary circumstances, then congratulations, you now get to bill for your report preparation time. Otherwise, you do not get to bill for your report preparation time. This interpretation of the ML 104 makes absolutely no sense. The credible authority that I referred to earlier has gone in writing and on record in stating that this was not the intention of the parties who authored CCR 9795. This was not their intention. It was their intention under ML 104 that we get paid for all time involved with the evaluation, including our report preparation time. After all, we get paid for our report preparation time under ML 101. For our reevaluation, we get paid for our report preparation under ML 105. For a supplemental report, why would we not get paid for our report preparation time under ML 104 unless we're able to obtain prior written agreement from the parties that the evaluation is extraordinary? This makes no sense to me, and I believe this has to blow over. This has to blow over. But as of yesterday, the Division of Workers' Compensation is undeterred, and they are sticking to their story. So, how is this going to impact you? Well, I have a case on my desk that I'm about ready to put in the mail. And when I was finished watching the online education, continuing education module from the Division of Workers' Compensation, I realized that my billing was going to be adversely affected. So let me tell you about this evaluation that I just recently did. And this is similar to similar to evaluations that I'm hearing about from other doctors as well. So I recently had an examinee about 2 weeks ago. Her report's now ready to go out. I had 3.05 hours involved with review of records. I had 4.1 hours face-to-face. That's 7.105 hours. That qualifies as 3 complexity factors. In addition, I had 2.13 hours of medical research. Now, that's a lot. For me, that's an unusual circumstance. I think this is the first report I've ever had 2 hours of medical research, but this report required medical research, and there was 2.13 hours involved with medical research. So that's 7.15 plus 2.13 is 9.28 hours. 9.28 hours. Now, in addition to that 9.28 hours, I also had 10.81 hours, more hours, 10.81 versus 9.28 hours. I had 10.81 hours involved with report preparation. What that means is, after coming back from the face-to-face evaluation, like you, sat down at my computer and started to pull together all the data involved with this case into a report which required 10.81 hours. Now, I'm telling you that not a single minute of that 10.81 hours is wasted. I'm a very good touch typist. Most of my reports have been templated for years, and so they're all laid out, and all of that work and all that foundation is already done. This 10.81 hours is hard work, focused, concentrated hours. Not a single minute in there is excess time. The report is not sure how many pages. It's going to come in at about 40 pages, I believe. Well, the total billing on this report for over 20 hours, 20.66 hours, comes in at $5,165. This is a bona fide ML-104 with a disputed issue related to causation. This is a denied case for which causation I was able to capture. Able to capture causation. It's an ML-104, has all the complexity factors. Not a single party would argue that this does not qualify as an ML-104. It's an ML-104, bona fide ML-104. I'm thinking, great, I have causation as a complexity factor because this is a denied case. But because I don't have a prior written agreement from the parties that the evaluation involves extraordinary circumstances, the DWC is telling me, and is telling all of us, that we cannot bill for our report preparation time. So 10.81 hours of report preparation time has to be written off in this case. That takes the billing from $5,165 to $2,320. That takes the doctor's hourly rate from $240.99, that's $250 per hour, minus costs and overhead, brings the doctor's hourly rate down to $240.99. Under the former billing scheme, under the Division of Workers' Compensation's new scheme, it brings the doctor's hourly billing rate to $103.29, from $240 to $103 per hour. More than a 55 to 60% reduction in the charges for the report and in the doctor's hourly billing rate for the report. In addition to that, this change increases the overall percentage of overhead for the evaluation. As you know, every evaluation has overhead. If you use a satellite office and you have to pay rent for this particular evaluation, there's a cost. If you're traveling to see this examinee to and from, there's costs. Every evaluation has costs, and I recommend that you maintain a spreadsheet to track your costs, to track all of your evaluations, and to track the profitability and the overhead of all your evaluations. This evaluation was coming in at 4% overhead. Now, under the new interpretation and the reduction in fee from $5,165 to $2,320, the overhead on this case has doubled. So the charges billed have been reduced by approximately 55 to 60%, and the overhead has doubled. Now, is this the direction that you want to see your business endeavors going? To me, this is a negative direction, and I'm sure you will agree as well. Well, I don't know what much there is to say about it, except to say that the evaluation of injured workers, at least under the new regime and under the new interpretation of the complexity factors, basically has become prohibitive. There's no profit to be made in it at all. The doctor's hourly rate has diminished down to very low wages. Now, it's my it's my belief, at least according to our credible authority that we're banking on, that the Division of Workers' Compensation originally intended us to be paid at the $250 per hour rate. That's what the ML 101 provides for. That's what the ML 106 provides for. That's what the ML 104 provides for if we're able to get written agreement from the parties. It's my opinion that the Division of Workers' Compensation originally intended for us to be paid about $250 per hour. About. And that includes for the ML 102 and the ML 103. Those are reports that are brief reports that should involve no more than 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 hours to maintain the rate, the doctor's billing rate, at about $250 per hour. Under the new interpretation of the DWC's interpretation of the complexity factors, as you see, the doctor's hourly billing rate can come in at about $103 per hour, and even less as you spend more and more time involved with report preparation. So where does this leave us? What is the recommendation? I don't know. We're developing our new paradigms as we speak, but what this new interpretation has the effect of doing is it has the effect of discouraging the doctor from spending any time on report preparation. How can you spend any time on report preparation if you're not getting paid for it? So I see reports going from 35 pages down to 3 pages, How can a doctor spend the time involved in putting together complex arguments, thorough opinions, supported conclusions, substantial medical evidence opinions on causation, permanent impairment, apportionment? How can the doctor spend any time doing this? I see a scenario coming where doctors are presenting reports that are 2 and 3 pages long that contain only the conclusions and no data at all. No physical exam data, no diagnostic study data. They simply contain the conclusion. What would be the conclusion of the exam? The conclusion of the exam is the diagnosis, right? I see reports devoid of the data that contributes to the diagnosis. I see reports that provide only the diagnosis. And if the parties want the data, want the reasons, want the support, want the how and why reasoning, they want the substantial medical evidence, that's going to have to come by way of supplemental report. I don't know if this is where it'll go. I'm speculating, but it seems to me if the doctors are not going to get paid, if we are not going to get paid for our report preparation time, how much time can we afford to spend on report preparation? And I think these are some of the things that the Division of Workers' Compensation has not thought about, has not fully consulted with experts in the field to see what is the ultimate ramification of these changes. I think the ultimate ramification of these changes is going to be reports that are shorter and shorter and briefer, because spending time on report preparation is now simply prohibitive. So we await the determination of the upcoming lawsuit, and hopefully this will be a lawsuit and a hearing that actually provides us some answers. But if you know anything about the legal system, you know that we could not have answers on this for months and months and years and decades, the way the legal system is and the way lawyers are. So we await the determination of this upcoming lawsuit, and we can simply hope that the Division of Workers' Compensation will arrive at a more reasonable interpretation of the complexity factors. Otherwise, I see the number of QMEs dwindling down to very few doctors who are willing to work for very, very low hourly rate of reimbursement. But as I said, all of that remains to be seen. So If you have not had a chance to watch the DWC's new video, I encourage you to do so. Make sure you have a pen and paper handy so that you can take notes during the discussion of the complexity factors. And when it comes time to bill your report, you have two choices, as I see it. You have two choices. You can comply with the Division of Workers' Compensation's new criteria, or you can choose to ignore the Division of Workers' Compensation's new criteria under the belief, under the hope that their new interpretation is going to be found to be unsupportable and not supported by the language of the law. You can have that in your back pocket as your hope. I see those as your two options with your very next report. So I don't know if this helps you, but I hope it does help you, at least as far as decision making about your own future. So this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on today's video, and I look forward to being with you on future videos. And for now, I'm wishing you best of success in your career as a qualified medical evaluator.